This meeting is being held remotely as an alternative means of public access pursuant to an order issued by the Governor of Massachusetts dated March 12, 2020, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. You are hereby advised that this meeting and all communications during this meeting may be recorded by the town of Hingham in accordance with the open meeting law. Any participant wishes to record this meeting, please notify the chair at the start of the meeting in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, so that the chair may inform all other participants of said recording. I don't see any members of the public. Is there anybody that wants to record this? I don't see anyone. We are recording it though, correct, Sue? So for anyone listening,
Yep, we are.
the meeting will be available on the HCAM YouTube station. So questions from the public on items not on the agenda? Does anyone have any questions?
The public being Donna?
Yeah.
Do you have any questions?
Dawn is a member emeritus.
Chair Emeritus.
So, and if I recall correctly, Donna, didn't you actually have 2 terms on the AdCom?
I did a partial, and oh yes, I did 2 full terms on the AdCom.
But I mean at 2 separate times?
I did a 1 year 30 years ago.
And then you came back.
And it didn't totally turn me off, and I came back.
There you go.
Yeah, everybody, you have work to do. Let me get out of the way. Bye.
Welcome again. Once a chair, always a chair. Get back to work, you people. Okay, so we have our discussion and vote on the advisory committee policies and procedures. I want to thank Daveline and her team for putting this together. I think Daveline has highlighted, I think the remaining parts of the advisory committee rules. Do you want to walk us through this, Daveline?
Well, yes, I received a couple of sets of comments this afternoon from Victor and from Andy. And so I have added a few additional things. I didn't want to get into sending out more things and just confusing people, because I think for the most part, they're really just adding a sentence here or there. So that would, I thought highlighting when I sent it out was easier than trying to have 8 zillion versions of track changes, just to try to make it so it would read well. So I have a couple of comments. Andy also did a lot with looking at will, shall, should, etc., but said, I don't want to misquote him here, but that he didn't see those as substantive changes. And I went and I reviewed them this afternoon, and I didn't see them really as changing either, but I have added a few things. So in the preamble, I've added general after Hingham and before bylaws. So that's, that's pretty non-substantive in terms of changes. One question I had from some comments I've received, and then even from how I did it myself, is where every time we use article, if the word warrant should be before it, or is it just enough to say article? And I think it should be consistent one way or the other. So that if people have views of. Let's see. So if we look at number 2, this is one that Victor caught, and it's really interesting when you look at something that's been approved over and over and over again, but you look at language and you think, oh, that's actually not exactly correct. And so that's something Victor picked up on. So in number 2, that it should really say a public hearing rather than a public meeting, because we have hearings on the articles. So I have changed that to be a public hearing will be held upon each article, and the notice would be given. So that's because that's actually correct. That's what it says, is that we will have hearings on those. So then I added on number 4, I just added in teams. I tried throughout this to make clear that we have liaisons, which are the individuals that are appointed to things, and those liaison groups can become teams or subcommittees, or they could just be all alone. So tried to do that. On number 6, this is, I think, the language we talked about at the last meeting. As soon as practicable after the beginning of the fiscal year, the chair will make these appointments. So to make that clear. And then Victor had a comment as to whether the language in 6 and the language in 8 should be basically the same in talking about what these two different groups do. They're similar. I tried actually not to have them completely identical because I was trying to keep clear that there is some difference between a liaison, a team, and a subcommittee. And so I thought if the language was identical, it might make that more difficult. But again, what I can go with is, of course, the committee's preference. Number 7, the language that George suggested of the gathering information on budget, warrant articles, or any other assigned topics, which we had talked about last time. And I also added in that, in the first sentence, this was Victor's suggestion, town departments, boards, committees, or for review of warrant articles. So that would just cover every possibility. On number 9, Andy, yes.
Sorry to interrupt. Where was that last part about the towns, the committees,
So the first sentence where it says liaisons to certain town departments, boards, committees, or for review of warrant articles.
and which number?
Number 7,
Okay, thank you.
the end of the first sentence. Let's see. Number 9, Andy suggested adding the following sentence at the end, which we did talk about at our last meeting, and I just didn't think about it. Signing a potential candidate's nomination papers shall not be considered endorsing or supporting a potential candidate, because we had talked about that. So,
So are we talking about this? Are we having a discussion, or are we just going through all the changes? I'm sorry.
We can have discussion as we go.
yeah, I was gonna say, it doesn't matter. I only have one more addition, which was just, that wasn't in the yellow. And I'm now trying to, so on number 12, this was Victor's suggestion and made sense, just taking out the word other. So it's proponent of any article, because the beginning part talks about unless it's capital outlay. Did that make sense? Everybody?
Well, I mean, we are actually the proponent of, like, did we make the Board of Selectmen the proponent of the AdCom article this year?
Right, yeah, that's, I took out the, because on the advice that you gave me of town council, we took out that we wouldn't be a proponent of an article, but there is still this provision where capital outlay might be. And therefore, so the committee wouldn't be, but the question is, no member of the committee, but if you're a member of the capital outlay committee and a member of this committee, you might be in a position of recommending an article.
There's no other article because we can't do it the way this is written.
Right, right. So it made it, yeah, it was superfluous. So it was a good, it's why it's good to have eyes, lots of eyes on these. So that's really, so it's up for discussion, whatever people want to go from here. I think that sort of says, I tried to convey what people conveyed to me.
So my comment would just be on number 9. And by the way, I'll start by saying, I actually love the kind of unwritten club rule that we're not supposed to do this. And I guess I don't necessarily completely object to have this in there, but to me, it's a suggestion because there's no penalty for it. Or what? Would it kick them off? I mean, and once you've endorsed somebody, are you gonna walk it back? I mean, I guess you can, but I'm not looking to use this to endorse a candidate. I'm just saying, to me, it's like kind of a flaccid thing. That's got no teeth behind it. Not the way, and I'm not criticizing the way you wrote it, Dave Lee. I'm just thinking, in theory, you know.
No, this
Are you
is,
suggesting that we add a penalty clause in there, Evan?
No, I mean, really.
there is a penalty at the end. We could go into executive session and we could sanction someone for violating any of our procedures.
Like what? Or what? The chair is gonna call you? Ooh, I mean, I don't know. Like, it's just, it doesn't have me shaking in my boots. It actually makes me want to put a sign in front of my house, actually. That's just how I am, though.
I think point number 19 covers if the committee really feels like it's egregious and.
Yeah, 19 is the penalty clause. Well, I don't know. If you remember, my original draft of this said you could endorse. So, and the committee's was pretty clear that that was not what we wanted to say. And my point was just we should say one or the other. We should just be clear on.
I agree. We should be clear, but like, or say nothing at all.
Yeah, that wasn't what the committee wasn't in favor of saying nothing at all the last time, I think, unless I totally misunderstood.
All right.
Which could be.
I might just be being difficult.
Well, let's hope we never have to invoke paragraph 19.
Exactly. Like it's like the 25th Amendment. We're gonna eradicate AdCom of a nasty, actor.
Because I quite frankly wonder whether we could legally silence a member who's been duly appointed.
Yeah.
You want to be a test case, Evan?
Well, I've tried a few times and no one's thrown me off yet.
Any further discussion?
I guess we should discuss I had raised the question on 6, and I don't feel strongly about this, but that David Lean was describing that. So 6 and 8, 6 deals with liaisons, 8 deals with subcommittees. They both say in the second sentence of 6, and I guess the third sentence of 8, as soon as practicable after liaison or subcommittee assignments are made, each liaison or each subcommittee shall meet with the department, etc., in order to become familiar. And I guess I'm wondering whether that's confusing. I mean, does that liaison individually do it and then do it as part of the subcommittee? Should that be somehow combined in the same paragraph, that thought about after liaison or subcommittee assignments are made, each liaison or subcommittee as applicable shall meet? Maybe I'm making it too complicated and it's clear as it is, but that was my thinking on that. And, so that's why I'm raising it for committee's consideration. And David Lean, there's a typo in the second line of 8, by the way.
Okay. Oh yeah, I caught that actually earlier today. Thank you.
Just noticed it now.
Yeah, no.
And 6, the only thing we've added to 6 is that first.
Yes.
8 is new, right?
Right. So part of this was trying to differentiate this idea of, part of this is trying to deal with the open meeting law and to have teams differentiated from subcommittees, but we also have liaisons. So I tried to take it by, first we have liaisons, because that's what we all are individually. And then sometimes our liaisons form into teams and sometimes they form into subcommittees. And that was part of why I had it. And I agree, you could think, well, do I as an individual and a liaison who's also part of a subcommittee, do I need to meet with everyone twice? I don't think we would read it that way logically. So I guess that was why I wasn't trying necessarily, because the last time what I heard was I wasn't making it clear enough the differences between subcommittees, teams, and liaisons. So
I saw 8 as primarily governing something like the water company subcommittee or ACES.
yeah, I think that,
Whereas I saw 6 as more of the year in, year out mechanics of liaisons, teams, and I suppose a little bit of subcommittees as well.
yeah. But I'm happy to change it however people want. I mean, this is our document. It's not.
I mean, maybe given Bob's explanation, it makes sense to leave it as it is, although it does suggest, it does suggest that there are lots of subcommittees meeting with lots of boards, but that, I guess we would know in practice that that's not the case.
In point 8, would you want to remove sentence 3? Because that's sort of like, hey, I'm on a subcommittee, let's learn everything about, I don't know.
I mean, certainly the subcommittee ACES, for example, would meet with the school people promptly. And I guess, if you were just relying, before we had this paragraph, 6 did the same thing, right?
Right.
But all the liaisons of ACES as a group met with the school folks.
Right.
The other, where Bob's example of the water company, I guess that actually doesn't really fit into this, because the water company was designed for a special warrant article or an anticipation of a warrant article, rather than to meet with a department about, a budget or something of that sort.
My memory is it wasn't organized until well into the EdCom season.
That's right.
But it was
Well, and
organized as a subcommittee.
And at the risk of extending this discussion, ACES, there's that section, that third sentence to me reads as if it's a new committee, a new subcommittee. And whereas ACES is at least for the foreseeable future, kind of a persistent subcommittee with changing membership, to familiarize yourself fully with the organization and the function of the department board committee. I mean, that rings a little inconsistent as it relates only to ACES, because it's a persistent activity.
But when
I don't
your
think
new
it's
people have to do that?
well, we don't. Well, we haven't. Maybe I'm more just defending
No,
my
I
own
don't know.
chairmanship, but we haven't sent new people to meet with. I mean, I get the point, and I actually have no problem with the language. And as I thought through this paragraph, I thought about, I don't want to create a fourth category of a persistent subcommittee, because then it creates all other headaches. So maybe it's just well enough to leave as it is, or maybe it's something as simple as, to the extent the committee is new or newly formed, blah, 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 blah. Maybe there's just a little bit, but at the end of the day, with all due respect, I wouldn't read this next year and conduct ACES differently necessarily. So it's a guideline. So I get the point. I just wanted to call out that reads to me like a new committee as opposed to a persistent one, but CPC would be the other one that kind of leaps out at me, even though never mind, that's a team. So scratch that.
Well, I think the thing about the subcommittees, as I understood from our earlier discussion, each year, the ACES is a new subcommittee in the sense that the chair has appointed that subcommittee.
True.
So to the extent you would have people who wouldn't be familiar, you would need to do that. But so I guess that's part of how I was seeing it from our earlier discussion.
Yeah, like I said, I'm too close to it probably, but because I think it works and there's
I mean, I
nothing
think in the end,
problematic.
you do what needs to be done in that
Yep.
sense. Yeah.
I had a thought on this paragraph, and it was to say in the first sentence, where appropriate, the chair, instead of will, say may appoint subcommittees to serve as liaisons to certain town departments, boards, or committees, and will designate a chair.
And Andy, I was trying to get away from using liaison in anything other than the individual role, so as to keep clear liaison, team, and subcommittee. So I noted that you had made that suggestion, but I didn't think it made it clearer. Maybe other people do. I did.
The only, what, isn't it necessary to specify that the purpose of an individual or a team or a subcommittee is to be liaison to a particular town entity?
Isn't that inherent in the statement that they're going to meet with the relevant boards, et cetera?
It is to us for sure, because we know what we mean, but
Well, they are our procedures.
Well, who else is gonna read this? And I mean, sweet Jesus.
Could be the anchor next week.
Victor, wow. That was a good one.
I guess what I was trying to, the point I was trying to get at, I just stated, and that the function of the subcommittee and the team is no different from that of the individual liaison or an individual acting as liaison. That's the point I was trying to get across. The other thing I would change in that paragraph is where it says each subcommittee will meet. I changed this in 6, and I forgot to change it here, but I would change meet to communicate with. As we saw this year, we could not meet with them. And I don't know if Zoom meetings are going to become the wave of the future, or instead of in-person meetings or not. So that's why I would substitute communicate for meet. And finally, I added a sentence here and in paragraph 6 that said, here it says, subcommittees may provide periodic reports to the committee when requested to do so by the chair. Just to make clear
And I think that was included earlier when I looked at that, we had actually said that you would that liaisons would make reports to the full committee. So I actually thought that just added something that was already included.
what it said, what it says is the liaison will report its recommendations to the full committee.
Okay.
And I just thought that to me said that, that you do it only once.
Okay, so that would say then at the end of each of those, to add that liaisons may provide periodic reports to the committee. I don't think it's necessarily though when requested to do so by the chair, because usually we add ourselves to the agenda to do that. So I would leave out that part. I would just say liaisons may provide periodic reports to the committee, and the same thing then with subcommittees.
And there is a statement in 8 about reporting its recommendations to the full committee.
Right.
Yeah, and the problem I had, Bob, is that in the context of that sentence, it seems to me that what you're saying is you're going to report one time on your recommendations regarding the warrant article proposal. And I just thought that,
As I said, I would add unless there's objection, I would add at the end of 6, liaisons may provide periodic reports to the committee, and at the end of 8, subcommittees may provide periodic reports to the committee.
Yeah, and
think
the only reason I added the last clause, and I don't care whether you do it or not, was to make clear that they have to be, as Bob has and others have specified, they have to be items on the agenda in order to make the report. And that phrase about at the request of the chair indicates that unless the chair puts it on the agenda, that's not going to be.
But it's, we request ourselves to be put on the agenda. So I don't think that is necessarily accurate.
Well, you can't put
can't
yourself
make
on
the
the
report
agenda if the,
Under
because
the
the
open
policies
meeting
say
law, you
the,
can't- oh, sorry.
We
the
may be
chair shall
rabbit
put-
holing.
Yeah,
we
you
may-
can't make the report unless you're on the agenda. So I don't,
yeah, and you can't put yourself on the agenda. You have to ask the chair to put you on the agenda. Because one of the provisions says that the chair shall prepare the agenda.
right. So I think, all I'm saying is I don't think that last part of the sentence is necessary. It's enough to say that you may provide it. You obviously can't provide anything unless you are on the agenda. Sorry, yeah, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole either.
I don't have any problem with the language about periodic reports. It does seem that ordinarily, I mean, ACES made it one report generally, although it provides, I suppose, interim statuses of activities. I think the water subcommittee probably made interim reports of its activities, but only made one final recommendation. And I like keeping the distinction between liaisons, teams, and subcommittees. Because of course, subcommittees are a majority vote to a conclusion as opposed to liaisons. It's just an individual recommendation. So further discussion?
Yeah, Bob, let me run through some of the other ones, starting from the beginning that I had proposed. In paragraph number 2, it's the second last sentence that begins the third last sentence. Committee shall add to this recommendation such explanations. And I just said I would add to its, make that its budget recommendation.
Actually, what I have that you put, Andy, was that you would have proponents and opponents of the budget.
That's down below.
That's not on the one I have. I have your copy here. I've printed out.
Yeah.
It says eliciting input and information from proponents and opponents, and what you wanted to add was department budgets. And
Yeah.
We don't have people who show up to oppose budgets.
No, but okay, you can drop opponents if you want, but you might have some, but you certainly invite the proponents of the
No,
budget.
what
to
you
show up.
added was department budgets.
Correct.
I guess I just did. I mean, I did go through the things that you sent me this afternoon. I didn't see some of them as making things clear.
Yeah, the point I was trying to make is that we deal with budgets and warrant articles. And I wanted to be clear about that. So I would be a proponent of putting warrant before articles. And in this one, eliciting input and information from proponents and opponents of department budgets and warrant articles. If people don't feel the way I do, then we can let it pass.
We also discussed that above, so I guess I didn't.
And yeah, I made the change in paragraph 2 of the preamble.
Right. I'm looking at your changes right here.
Yeah, in paragraph 2, above in the preamble,
Mhm.
The committee conducts its business in open public meetings, the purposes of which include but are not limited to: one, eliciting input and information from proponents and opponents of department budgets and warrant articles. Right?
Right, and what it said before was articles. So my point was, in adding department budgets, I don't think we have people who come to oppose the budgets. So I didn't see what that was. That didn't seem like our business. But what do people, I mean, if people want to include that. Andy has a lot of potential things here, so we could be
I
doing.
bet he does.
Would it, I find it pretty difficult to follow between the two lawyers arguing back and forth. Is it possible to get a red line version of all these changes so we can follow them?
Yep, I can send it now.
I would also like to add that the changes that we've made to date that we discussed earlier tonight are really good changes to the document. We go through them every year, so it's not the final word on this document. And because we're doing it so late in the season, we'll be heading right back into it. Have to review it sometime this fall. So just a suggestion that we don't have to. It's a working, living document. So that's just my 2 cents.
And we won't talk about it again for 2 more years. Thank God.
Well, no,
Eric, Evan, I gotta tell you how tired I am of hearing you say things like that. I really am. I mean,
Okay.
I spend a lot of time and
Wait.
obviously Evelyn spent a lot of time looking this over. If you don't want to hear it, don't listen.
Time out, gentlemen.
I just sent Andy.
Dave, hold on a minute, please. We don't want this to get involved in personalities. I think that in order to properly consider this, that we need more time. I hate to defer it again, but I think, Andy, we're going to need to see your red line.
I'll forward that.
I just forwarded it to everyone.
In time for everybody to actually read it and think about it. And we'll put it on the agenda for next Tuesday, which is going to be a light night in any event. And maybe, Dave-Aline, you could take Andy's red line and put the other changes in that we talked about tonight that seem to be generally.
I will send my version with the changes I accepted from Andy and Victor and that we talked about tonight. And I've already sent everybody, I forwarded Andy's red line version.
Okay.
So.
All right. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, well, let's do with that one. We'll look at this next Tuesday night. We're gonna have a reasonably short agenda Tuesday night, and I think we can have a better discussion when people have actually had some time to think about what the proposed changes are. So, okay. So unless is there any further discussion that makes sense to have tonight on these policies and procedures? Okay, let us go on to our next agenda item, which is preparation for town meetings. So I circulated my understanding of the liaison speaker responsibilities for each of the warrant articles and for each of the budgets. Hopefully, there will be little demand for people to be called upon to speak from the advisory committee. But inevitably, something is going to come up. So first of all, I wanted to double check with everybody that I got all the assignments correctly. I did hear from Libby, who could not join us tonight because she's tied up with work assignments. And she indicated on the town pier that Bill Reardon would probably take the lead on that. So we'll be discussing this at the moderators meeting I'm going to pass these lists on to Mike Puzo so that he would know who to call upon in the event that the advisory committee is called upon to address either one of the warrant articles or the budgets. So did anybody see any discrepancies in my listings?
Hey, Bob, this is, sorry, let me see. There's an I'm incorrectly attributed to the updated floodplain protection overlay, Article 27.
Okay, so who has that?
I have floodplain.
All right, so that's Victor. All right, okay. So I'll change that on my list. The odds of a question being asked on that are 200 to 1.
Well, that would be planning board would speak first anyway, presumably.
Right.
Well, you now just secured the fact that Victor's going to get a question.
Okay. Any other observations about speakers or who will take the lead on articles? Okay. Then I wanted to discuss the form of the Article 6 motion, because after we last, I don't know if everybody's read their warrant or looked at how the Article 6 motion was ultimately formulated. Because there was some considerable discussion between Mary Power and myself and Julie and town council and Tom Mayo and Michelle about how to make the appropriation of fund balance. In last year's warrant, for example, the amounts attributed to fund balance were separately specified to various capital expenditures in conjunction with our financial policy. In this year, there was some thought initially of attributing the fund balance to the education budget, which would not technically be in compliance with the financial policy, except to the extent that it may be addressed education capital or the one-time losses. Ultimately, town council recommended that the motion simply indicate that there be a one-time appropriation and transfer of fund balance in the amount of $4.9 million to balance the FY22 budget without making specific attributions to specific accounts. So, for example, we could have done the same thing we did last year with capital. We could have done it with debt retirement. But we don't know how the reimbursement process is going to work with respect to the federal funds. And we thought there was something to be said for flexibility. So I think I've captured the principal elements of the discussion that led to the formulation of the motion as you see it in the warrant. I don't know, Sue or Julie, if you want to add anything, or if there are specific questions or any discussion of that.
Bob, could I?
Yes, George.
Does this language then set some type of a precedent for the future?
I don't think so.
Okay. So there wouldn't be another call for a fund balance to be used in an unspecified manner?
Well, I think that it provides an option for what could be done in the future, among other options, such as making a specification of a fund balance transfer, as was done last year
Right.
with respect to specific capital costs.
Right.
But I don't think doing it this way, which I understand from John Coughlin, is how other towns have done this.
Okay.
It's simply one way for the town to approve the use of fund balance. And I mean, if you look at the town finances as one big pot of money that ultimately is being allocated to different departments and expenditures, you know, where something comes out of the pot, I suppose, is in the hands of our esteemed town accountant.
Right, but if we have a financial policy that says that fund balance can't be used for operational expenses, and yet by your explanation, money is fungible and where it goes. So who's to say it doesn't go for operating expenses?
Well, there's more than $4.9 million worth of expenses in this year's town budget that
Right.
would qualify for the use of fund balance.
Okay.
And again, one of the concerns was, because we don't know what the fine print is going to be
Sure.
on the American Rescue Plan Act,
Mhm.
that we wanted to keep things as flexible as possible.
Flexibility is good. I agree with that. I just don't want us to be in a situation next year or the following year, whatever, where somebody says, oh, well, back in 21, you did this, and now you're saying you can't do that. So, but as you know, that John Coughlin says this is the way other towns do it, then I'm happy with that.
Okay.
Bob,
Yes, Andy.
so in the recommended motion, where you say that provided that a one-time appropriation and transfer of fund balance in the amount of 4.9 million is hereby made to balance the fiscal year 2022 budget. You're not referring to the education budget.
We're referring to a general appropriation, which includes $4.9 million to fund the budget as stated below.
So that, again, my point, you're not trying to say 4.9 million is going from fund balance to the education budget.
I'm not trying to say that in this recommended motion, correct?
It's,
Right.
yeah, the whole budget, Andy.
Yeah, and that's what I just wondered is whether we should put in to balance the, well, you can't put it in, it's too late. But
Well, the comment that Julie spent a lot of time on does address, you know, some of the things driving the need for the fund balance. The advisory committee report addresses the same thing, as does the selectmen's report. But basically in Article 6, the town makes a collective appropriation from sources available to it, the levy or fund balance, to fund the budget as stated below.
okay.
I mean, I think if a rating agency were to say to us somewhere down the road, how is this consistent with the financial policy? I think the answer would be what I said to George a moment ago, that there is far more than $4.9 million in capital and debt reduction and the rest of it in the budget that is consonant with the financial policy. So again, it provides flexibility. And we probably had 3 hours of discussion about this.
I'm convinced.
Any further questions, observations, concerns? And if someone raises a question at town meeting, I think I get to take the first crack at it. And then I'll point to Sue.
Who will not be there. No. Oh, I'll be wearing disguises.
Okay. All right, so I just wanted to, point that out to people. I mean, we all agreed at our budget vote that we'd use 4.9 million of fund balance. And so I felt that the appropriation was within the scope of what we had voted. Our next agenda item is the, if it's ready, is Article U, the Plymouth River School windows, which we still needed to vote an amount. Dave, do you have an update on that?
John Ferris is meeting with the designer maybe tomorrow. So I do not yet have an update, but he hopes to get a number out of that meeting.
All
And
right,
then so I can report back at our next meeting. Is that next week?
It'll be next Tuesday night.
Okay, yeah. So as soon as I have a number, I'll share it with you and Julie, and we can
Okay.
take it from there.
All right, well, I can put it on the agenda without knowing the number, but we'll need to know it in order to vote it.
Yeah.
And we're gonna have to vote the reserve fund transfer next week in any event, which I understand is still being calculated.
Dave, the school building committee is meeting tomorrow night and the PRS windows is on the agenda, so they would
Good.
have.
Yeah, I think John has a meeting with the designer, he said tomorrow, I'm assuming during the day. So hopefully that's all consistent with him presenting to the building committee tomorrow night.
Okay.
And that brings us to the minutes of March 23rd.
Everybody has a red line version, and I have not received any additional edits, comments, suggestions, changes since those went out on Sunday. So
I thought they looked good, George.
thank you.
I just wanted to make one change or suggest one change, George. In the, I apologize for not getting it to you. In the March 23rd
Yeah.
minutes, where it says, where is it? In the 4IDDD about the attached dwelling units.
Yep.
And where it says, I think it's the last sentence, the PB felt that more time was needed to study the issue and to understand all the issues. And I would just say, instead of was needed to study the issue, insert instead whether to permit detached accessory dwelling units.
So strike and to understand all the issues, that part of the sentence?
Yeah, strike the phrase "the issues" and insert whether to permit detached accessory dwelling units.
Okay, the PB felt that more time was needed to study whether to permit attached accessory dwelling units.
Right, and to understand, et cetera.
Okay.
So, yeah, the rest of the sentence is fine. I would delete all, but that's not necessary, all of the issues. I was gonna change benchmark communities, but thought that I would get hissed off the meeting if I did, so,
Okay, is that the only change, Andy?
yeah.
Okay,
Well, Mary Power did observe that you did an excellent job educating us on what a benchmark community is at one of our later discussions. So I will pass that on to you.
Thank you.
So any further discussion on the March 23rd minutes? So is there a motion to approve those minutes as revised?
So moved.
And a
Second.
second?
Second.
Okay, then we come to vote. Daveline,
Aye.
George,
aye.
Brenda,
Aye.
Kristen,
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Victor,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Devin,
Aye.
Alan,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Julie,
Aye.
and Andy.
Aye.
So we have 12-0.
Yep, that's what I got.
Okay. And that brings us to the March 25th minutes.
George, was it-
Likewise, I have not received any additional edits or comments since Sunday, so
I have one request, George.
yes.
When I read over the red line in paragraph 5, the red line paragraph under subparagraph 5 that says Chair Curley. And I got to the word immaterial. I didn't know whether that should have been material or immaterial. And I think you should just strike the word.
Okay, I was using it to signify there were small differences.
I figured that was it,
But I can strike it.
I thought that was covered by the explanation of what the variances were for.
Okay,
And other than that, I thought they looked fine to me.
George,
okay.
in the red line in 3, in the first line, there's a typo at the end. So you repeated in the,
I'm sorry, Victor, where are you?
in number 3,
Three.
the red line, the first line of the red line,
Yep,
at the end of that line,
yep.
you repeat in the.
Oh, in the, yep, got it.
Any other revisions? Is there a motion to accept the minutes of March 25th as revised? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Daveline,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Brenda,
Aye.
Kristen,
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Victor,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Ellen,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Julie,
Aye.
Andy,
Aye.
and Evan.
Aye.
Okay, I think that's 12-0 again. Okay.
If we could jump back to the order of speakers and Aaron's point, I was looking at the chart. So it's correct that I'm doing floodplain, but it looks like Aaron's listed next to ADU, which is Andy.
Oops, I didn't catch that.
So just to make sure we're all on the same page. I have flood, Andy has ADU, and Andy also has easements, which is on number 30. Is that right, Andy?
Correct.
Let me,
Now, Victor, let me ask you whether uh, I should speak or the planning board chair should speak on the ADUs.
That's interesting. I mean, typically for zoning, the planning board would speak first, and often we don't say anything, although,
Right,
you know, I think the last ADU, Donna did speak, and that was the same year marijuana was up, and I spoke on that, but the planning board led off. I don't know, I guess I'll throw it out to Bob. Here where the recommendation is not to go ahead with the proposal, but it's actually to form a study committee. I don't know whether it's.
Is there any indication that Ray Estes is going to propose a different affirmative motion?
the answer, I believe, is no. I have not spoken with him directly, but when the planning board took its vote, he spoke and said that he did not plan to push his petition at town meeting. And there was some discussion about, previously there had been some discussion about whether he should withdraw it. And the suggestion was made, if he withdrew it, there would be no platform on which to establish a study committee. So I can ask him if you think it would be prudent, but I would be surprised if either he pushed the article or really spoke about it.
Sounds like the inquiry probably is unnecessary. It also sounds to me that especially at that time of the town meeting, that the moderator is probably going to say, is there any discussion? And nobody's going to say anything. And then we're just going to vote. And it's probably going to be a unanimous vote.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like the establishment of a study committee is pretty non-controversial.
Yeah.
Tabling?
Yeah, I was going to say at the Board of Selectmen hearing on the article, on this article, Ray Estes said he was not opposed to the study committee. He was supporting it, so.
Okay. All right, good. So, you know, I mean, we'll know better after the moderators meeting, I suppose, what the planning board is going to do. Are you going to be attending that, Andy? Do you know?
I hadn't not planned to. If you would like me to, I can.
Well, I can let you know.
Okay,
I
that's
can let you
fine.
know what the determination is.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
And so we'll take it from there. I can give people an update. I mean, I think that I should, out of an excess of caution, post an AdCom meeting for the moderators meeting on Sunday, just in the event that we get a quorum. I mean, it's going to be a simple agenda that just says to participate in the moderators meeting, and that's going to be it. And
Good idea.
and so I think you'll see that coming out. I'm not suggesting that people need to attend. If anything comes up that people need to be made aware of, that I think you won't be made aware of, I can either let you know Tuesday night or just by email. And I think I sent out the invitation to everybody with the Zoom information for the moderators meeting.
I've not seen it.
Not, okay.
I haven't seen it either.
Let me make sure I do that. I think Michelle sent that information around. Okay, so we will be the meeting on May 4th to address the policies, procedures, the Plymouth River School windows, a reserve fund transfer, And there's one other matter that's in the pipeline that's going to come up Tuesday night that we'll need a vote on as well, that I really can't say anything about as yet. So the town hall is going to open for in-person contact with the public on June 1st. And this raises the issue of whether we can have an in-person AdCom party this year, later in June. And the last one we had was at the Historical Society, and most people stayed outside. But there are big open rooms inside. There wasn't any close congregation that I can recall in the inside areas, but I thought I'd sort of poll people to see what members' comfort level is about an in-person party. In the past, I think we've had something like 80 attendees. I think the invite list is well over 100. And so that's a pretty good crowd. I think some people might self-select because of COVID as to not to attend a larger meeting. The alternative would be to do something by Zoom, a la last year's celebration. So how do people feel?
About an outdoor venue.
Or something like the Historical Society that's kind of indoors, outdoors.
Would we reduce the invitation list, the guest list?
We could do that. Daveling.
I have two different thoughts. One, although it was outside, people were pretty much congregated very closely together outside. So it wasn't like people were spread out. But the other thing is, it does take a fair amount of planning and work to put this together. Having been part of the group that did that the last time we did it, and I'm not sure that's something with town meeting and everything else going on, if that's something we would be really up for right at this late date.
Well, I think we'd have to look at, I think in the past, we've had it on like the second week or third week in June. We'd certainly have to do it before the end of the fiscal year. Julie and I are supposed to get information from Tom and Michelle tomorrow about Susan Sarney's view on whether she would say that an in-person AdCom party would be permissible from the Board of Health point of view. So hopefully we'll get that information tomorrow, and we can see what they say. But I mean, show of hands, how many people would like to see an in-person party? Weighing all the COVID complications. I'm seeing, I saw a half a hand raised from Alan. Julie says,
I'm vaccinated, so.
I'm vaccinated, I'm good.
I'm vaccinated too, but I don't know that I'd come.
No.
so it's.
I'd rather Susan Sarney take her energies and invest it in a senior prom, but that's.
You can't go to the senior prom, Nancy.
I know, damn it.
Well,
We want to send our kids to one, but whatever.
I'm not sensing a groundswell of support for an in-person AdCom party.
Well, and again,
I
I
think
think
that-
we have to have people willing to put it together too. And that,
I
Well,
think, I
we
think
know
we
who
might
they
have more
are.
information next Tuesday, Bob, because
Yeah, I can revisit that.
I think the governor is also gonna come out with some
Yep.
comments about
He
our
did.
events.
Yep.
Well, and I would
So-
just throw out, Bob, the thought, I mean, it's kind of counter, it wouldn't achieve the same purpose, but speaking for myself at least, it would be fun just if the 15 of us and Sue got a chance to get together somewhere. I mean, that might be a lot more manageable and we could do that in a number of different places without a lot of brain damage, which isn't to supplant the other one if it's doable, but my sense is that, well, I'll wait for Sue Sarney. She's a professional, but I would think the 15 of us, 16 of us could find a place to gather. That might be, it would just be nice to see everybody in person at least once this year.
I
Well,
think it's a great idea.
that's a segue to the next thing I was going to talk about, which is that it has been an AdCom tradition for the chair, of course, to bring goodies to the town meeting, but they are going to be prohibited. So
You're off the hook.
like Victor, I am off the hook from going Halloween shopping.
And now there'll be a counter tradition 2 years in a row, right? So,
Julie's
Little
already
gift
bought hers,
baskets could be brought to our houses.
And it has also been a tradition that the AdCom chair treats the members of the AdCom to a round or more of beverages of choice at the Snug at the conclusion of the town meeting. Now, the Snug is a cramped
it's
indoor space, and the likely time of the conclusion of the town meeting is 4:30, maybe 5 o'clock, maybe 5:30, but it's going to be at an early time when the Snug is already likely to have clientele. So it doesn't seem to me that that is necessarily the way to do it. But we have a fairly sizable back deck on our house, obviously outdoors. I already have permission from the boss to say that we would be happy to host a gathering of the AdCom members and or spouses on our back deck at the conclusion of the town meeting. Or if people think that's too early in May to, I mean, I think in accordance with the CDC guidelines today, we're probably pretty good in terms of doing something outdoor in small numbers where we can spread out. And so that's kind of my response to your idea, Dave, that
Well, it's very generous, Bob. No, I think it sounds great.
Jim Taylor could hop the fence from next door and he could join us. if he wants.
well, he might have to go through the gate, but
Yeah, do you think that would be in compliance with the CDC guidelines?
well, it certainly is for anybody that has their vaccination.
But the CDC right now for in-home is 25. So if it was just the 15 of us and Kathy,
And this would be outdoors.
say it again.
Yeah, and this would be outdoors.
Yeah, I don't think the CDC says 25 people in a home. I
I
think
believe
they,
it. I believe that residential is 25.
wow.
100, it's 150 for venues.
And again, we won't be inside, Andy. We'll be outdoors.
Yeah.
And if the town meeting happens on the 8th, that will be because it's a good day. Otherwise, we'll be using the rain date. So So we're kind of built into what would hopefully be good weather. So if I will put the planning in place.
Thank you.
I like it. Thanks, Bob.
Okay. Any matters not anticipated within 48 hours?
Did I miss the liaison report time?
Oh, no, I did. I didn't say, our next agenda item is liaison reports. So I skipped right over that, Brenda. My apologies. Are there liaison reports?
Having gone to the Hingham Light Plant meeting this morning, I thought people would be interested to know that the light plant has identified a 3/4 acre part of the transfer station property that is currently not developed. It's covered, tree covered, to the east of the bulky waste driveway that they think will meet their needs. It will require a certain amount of excavation to clear that space. They're in the process of getting it reviewed. There are some wetlands issues, but they're not expecting them to, at least they're hoping they will not be sort of stops. So that's where
Is
that,
that, Brenda, is that between the bulky waste and the
more Brewer Park, yeah.
cover? The landfill?
No, more Brewer
It's
Park.
it's east of, yeah, it's east of the bulky waste and towards Moore Brewer Park. So it is part of the transfer station, but nobody thinks of it because it isn't developed.
Is it visible from the that development that was all upset about the
It's on the other side, so it's on the other side of the transfer station, on the other side of the current distribution area. So I think,
Is it visible from Hobart Street, Brenda?
yeah, I mean, I think it's right at the exit. It's that whatever 3/4
Oh,
acre.
okay, okay.
looks like,
So it's just, as you're coming out the exit, it's on your right-hand side?
Yep, yeah, it's beyond the current driveway coming down from bulky waste. So it's that next chunk there.
And I thought they had said there were wetland issues.
There are, but they're
Closer to the
not
park.
expecting them to be stoppers, but we'll see.
Prohibitive, okay.
They're gonna fill them up with
Oh, they
waste.
folded
and
on
they're
that
not gonna be
fast.
wetlands anymore.
The wetland issues were on the
Other side.
parcel on the other side of the driveway.
Speaking of
Huge
that, Brenda,
wetlands were across the street on
did they ever identify who owns the parcel right beside the railroad tracks? They talked about, what was it, 58 or 53?
that's where the huge wetland issues were, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, who owns that, you know?
You refer to it as the Spirito. I think that might be where the gravel and the construction site is. So it might be his property, but I don't know for sure.
On the other side of the street,
And then
Yeah,
it's
it's
across
beside the
French
railroad
Street.
track.
French,
on the other, yeah.
French and over to the right of way.
Yeah, that's what I understood. The fellow across the street was the owner.
Behind, okay, all right.
But that sounds like a positive development, Brenna.
Okay.
So I'm just curious, does that mean that they're going to come forward with something else at town meeting then as it relates to the article?
No.
Okay.
Again, a good service by John Coughlin told them that as long as there was a memo of understanding between the town and HMLP, that they can go ahead with all the permitting activities they want to. So eventually, there will need to be a town meeting vote to transfer that piece of property to HMLP. But that may not even have to be next year.
Oh, because the town owns the transfer station?
Yes.
Got it.
And as long as there's a memo of understanding with the town, that the town will transfer this to them, that's all they need to start permitting with Hingham itself and the town of Weymouth and the state.
And then just one last quick question. So the only abutters to that parcel are Hobart Street to the north and then whoever owns Moore Brewer?
Presumably the Conservation Commission.
That's town owned as well then? I didn't know if Moore
I-
Brewer was a town or a state parcel. It's a town.
I think it's town.
Okay.
Sound true.
Okay.
You know, I was so happy to learn that Moore was a name because when it first was donated, I thought, wait a minute, you have Brewer Park and then across the street, you have Moore Land, you're gonna call it Moore Brewer? That's not all that.
I will tell you, I thought the same thing when we moved here.
I thought, wow, you gotta have a better imagination than that, you know? Hey, Aaron, how's that generator been working out for you since you recommended against the transfer station?
You know, I just have to hide. I can't go anywhere near many places in town, so.
That was a very brave recommendation. I applaud you for it.
Any other liaison reports? And I should have asked this question earlier. Anybody hearing anything about anything that's likely to provoke controversy at the town meeting that we got to think about addressing? I mean, it does seem to me, looking at the warrant, that things are pretty straightforward. Eveline?
I've been told I should expect that people will have questions about gender neutrality.
Oh, okay. All right.
I would think some people may express some dim views of the education budget.
Yeah, I was wondering if anybody had heard anything on that.
I haven't heard anything, but that the first communion down at St. Paul's is the same day as town meeting. It's in the morning, of course, and so that's going to probably take some people away from town meeting, but the older people may talk. I don't know. But I haven't
Well-
heard anything one way or the other. But then again, if you sit in your house all day and night, you don't hear a lot about anything.
I did hear some grumbling from a former AdCom member about the 34 FTEs, but she said she was ultimately going to vote for it. So I think some
AdCom members.
Julie.
I think that there's going to be mobilization of parents who will come, who will want to vote in favor of the budget as it's put forward this year. So, you know, you'll hear both sides. I think that Article 6 will definitely take up some time with people wanting to talk about it and maybe even preemptively getting up and saying how important the, especially the spending on the education budget is going to be. So.
Well, in my 6 minutes of fame, I may mention Dr. LaBillois' report on the negative consequences of the pandemic on the educational and social and emotional development of the students. And because, at least in my mind, that was the thing that really sealed the deal in terms of needing to come up with the resources to address this.
Hey, Bob, just curious, because in my lifetime in Hingham, I don't think I've seen the education budget held, but if we play that out and assume that someone holds Article 6, and I know we'll talk about this at the moderators meeting, but I'm just curious from this group, is the sense that you or ACES or I as ACES would speak first, or the school committee, or have you had any thoughts or conversations with the town about this?
I have not. I would think that you, Dave, as the chair of ACES.
You sure?
Did you resign?
You're breaking up. You said you were going to do that?
Right behind you, Dave. You're back.
I mean, if you'd prefer that I do it.
No, I'm joking. No, I was literally, the question more was not me. I assumed I was in the crosshairs, but that school committee and maybe just in terms of giving Puzo some direction. Obviously I haven't talked to Carrie about this, but would you anticipate that I would be followed by Dr. Austin or by Carrie, or would I be the
I think it's usually the political people that speak rather than the employees.
okay?
So I
So
would
Carrie,
expect that Kerry would speak, maybe Michelle.
do
you
you
know,
anticipate any of the selectmen wanting to speak on that?
I think they would probably leave it to the school committee unless they started to think that the discussion was getting out of hand.
Okay.
And I'd expect that there's going to be a lot of impassioned parents that would want to speak.
Yeah. And to that end, I mean, coming back to your initial question, I assume that we don't anticipate any alternative motions with respect to Article 6, at least as far as we know today. So it may just be a hold for the purposes of having a conversation about 34 FTEs, et cetera, as opposed to a Plan B.
I have not heard about anyone opposing an alternate motion.
Okay.
And I suppose it could go in either direction.
Yep.
Somebody could propose a budget that's $5 million less for the schools. Or somebody could say, well, I want to add $120,000 for the arts director.
Yes, fine arts
Uh,
director. All right, Bob, what I'll probably do is I'll share with you my anticipated ACES comments so you can try to dovetail those with yours. Because I do think that Dr. Jamie's, I mean, at the end of the day, I think that was the crux for a lot of people. And I think if you mention it, and I will certainly refer to it, but I don't want to be duplicative, but I think I think obviously that's a critical piece, a huge piece.
Well, I in my comments have to address the overall financial picture.
Yeah, understood.
Probably have to flag the likelihood of an override discussion for FY23. Certainly talk about the drivers of the increase in this budget. And, I'll be happy to share my comments, my draft comments with you once they're written out and timed. I will also say, especially to our new members, that if you think that you may be called on to speak, I think it has been generally advisable to have something written out and timed. You may not need a full 6 minutes, but it's good at least to, at a minimum, have an outline of what you want to say, if not the actual words. I put it in like a 25-point font so I can read it. But it's a beneficial exercise, even if you don't get called upon.
If somebody asks, what does the advisory committee plan to do with regard to the continuing discrepancy between the 2.5%, revenues and expenditures for the school department? Who would address that, and what would you say?
Well, I think to the extent that I were going to say anything, I would say that there have been discussions throughout this year at the forecast group that have flagged month after month, quarter after quarter, that growth rates of 4.8%, 4.6% are just not sustainable. And that the school committee report in the warrant expresses, as we expected it would, a recognition that they are going to have to take some action on their end, and that they are planning a strategic plan in which, as I understand it, They are going to try to identify ways to conceivably reallocate the resources they have so that perhaps they can achieve greater efficiencies in the expenditure of money. But it is, I think beyond that, I don't know that other than making a recommendation of an amount that doesn't give the schools everything they asked for, that the advisory committee has a real say in it. I mean, in past years, ACES has always recommended an amount that was less than what the schools were originally looking for, but it was an amount that was feasible within town resources. And I think we haven't had a school override since 2009. I understand that the current school employment contracts look to 2% increases year over year, which would be under the 2.5. Now, in my own mind, I'm not convinced about whether the steps and lanes don't alter that 2% number or not. But I mean, those are some of the things that I could think about saying. It's really, and Dave, you might want to add to that.
Right now or a town meeting?
Either way.
No, well, I think it's a good question, and I will confess to not. I would like to spend more time with the school, growth budget. I mean, I could spend a lot more time than 6 minutes on my questions about the inner workings of the school budget, and I'm hopeful that the strategic plan is something that lifts the hood on that in a way that we can all see what's there. I think everyone would be well served by that, and it includes the administration, who I don't think has a great grasp on it. And that's not a knock; it's just a function of habit. As this thing gets spit out of a computer program, and there's the number, and that's what it is. And so I think we need to do better than that over the long run. And I hope the strat plan is part of that. So,
yeah, Julie, you had your hand up a moment ago.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that especially for Kristen's sake, that the Community Preservation Committee for the Community Preservation article, it would be the CPC members who would speak if any questions came up for any projects. But I did have one thought that maybe Kristen, you would be prepared for, is there was some chatter during the process for the Hingham Affordable Housing funding that some people got on and said that they didn't want Affordable Housing Trust money to go towards buying any land at Old Ship Church, their parish house. And so I'm wondering if, Bob, your question about some things that people might talk about, there might be some chatter from people who are abutters in that area. So. I mean, the Community Preservation Committee cannot, they give the money. It's not in their purview to say what you're going to spend the money on, but I'm just saying that might be something that comes up at town meeting.
It seems like they're really getting ahead of the game. I mean, I know the town is interested in expanding the Lincoln School apartments, and that parcel is, the key to doing it. But it's not really before us this year or this town meeting.
Well, it's not, but it did come up a couple of times during the process, so.
Yep. Any other thoughts of things that might come up at town meeting we should address?
I would assume somebody would speak about the need for restrooms in Bear Cove Park, but I don't know. I haven't heard for sure.
So could you mute that man?
You know, it's not in the warrant, so no one will ever know, Andy. So I guess it'll have to be you who gets up to educate everybody about the crime that's happened this
I
year.
gotta tell you, Julie, that given that, you know, they close the bathhouse down, you're into the beach in the wintertime, that enclosed outdoor shower you have is just a lifesaver.
We should get you a sandwich board that you could wear outside the meeting.
Considering I shut off the water, Andy, how are those imaginary showers you took all winter?
Well, it's, you might want to check the drain too when you put the shower back.
We've definitely exceeded our agenda at this point. I will point out one other little nuance, only because it was brought to my attention, which relates to the school budget. In the AdCom report, I used 34 FTEs for the school budget. And in the selectmen's report, they had the number 32. And the eagle-eyed John Asher said, you know, what's the story? And I said, well, I was basing my number on Dr. Austin's report, which actually talks about 34.05 FTEs. But I think the discrepancy is the two contracted FTE positions. And that when the selectmen referred to 32, they were not including the two contracted positions. I don't expect anybody to bring this up other than the eagle-eyed John Asher, who will remain quiet at the town meeting. But in the unlikely event somebody does, you have the answer.
Well, Bob, my comment then contradicts your report, because I do have 32 FTEs for the schools and then 4 in the municipal departments. So
I thought the difference was that they didn't have 34 FTEs, but they were adding hours, which made up the difference. No?
No, Bob's right. The delta is two contractors who would make it 34. But I mean, and Andy, you're right too. You're not talking about 32 new bodies. There are some percentage FTE increases within that. So it's not even the 32 is not a nose number. It's less than 32 noses, if you will.
The Dr. Austin report that was distributed to everybody actually talks about a 0.5 here and a 0.25 there. And it's when you add them all up, you get to 34.05. So anything else for this evening? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Dave Lane,
Yes, aye.
George,
Aye.
Brenda,
Aye.
Kristen,
Aye.
Dave.
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Alan,
Aye.
Erin,
Hi.
Andy,
Aye.
Julie,
Aye.
Victor,
Aye.
and I've got a phone on the line. Is that you, Evan? I think Evan left the meeting, so I guess we're 11:00 to adjourn.